Yesterday I started moving my survival game that was initially made in Unity to Godot. Again, for no reason at all. And yesterday I got the player controller and the camera controller working, and also the player stats. And today I thought I had some graphics to it. Since I don't know anything about graphics in Godot, this is how it went. So before importing the player arms, I wanted to just work with something easier since the player arms have, animations and skeletons and everything. So I thought about just putting my low world survival pack into Godot to see how that goes, because that's just models or meshes. So it should be simpler, and I would need to do it anyways in like a day or two. So I just did that for like warm up. First off, I thought I could use an FBX same as in Unity, but I did some research and it seems like Godot mainly supports or recommends using GLTF. You can use FBX, but you need to then add an add-on, like Adobe add-on to use FBX, and it supposedly doesn't work that well as GLTF. Then if you drag and drop the GLTF into the scene, it only creates a node 3D, and you really need mesh data. You need it to be a mesh or a mesh instance, but that was easy to figure out because when you import a mesh, you can double click it and then select the mesh and save the file, and then you get the mesh data. At this point, I'm pretty sure you can delete the GLTF since now it's all written in the Godot's kind of resource file. Also, cool thing about Godot, rotation is the same as in Blender. When you export to Unity, you needed to rotate on the x-axis minus 90 degrees because they use different orientation systems. But in Godot, it's the same, so you can just zero out everything in Blender. Again, you can do that with Control A. It's really simple. It's not that much of a hassle in Unity. It's just really cool that it works this way. Also, texture was imported with the model, which I didn't like. I like to have them separate for easier editing, or if I need to change something, I can easily just re-import the texture, not the whole model. So in Blender, again, you can apply the transforms. So y-axis is up. And then when you export as GLTF, there's GLB, which is, I think, binary. And then there's GLB embedded or something like that, which is actually GLTF. And also there's a bunch of settings, like you can play around with them, but I decided to not import the material or set it to no export. Also the texture, I guess that was the only trouble I had with the texture since the colors weren't right and I couldn't figure it out, but there's a setting in the texture import settings. That's when you import the texture and double click it and then go to the import tab in the top left. It was for me, I think that's the default position. And then there's the compress mode. Now it's set to VRAM compressed. I set it to lossless because then the colors worked properly. But also the texture is blurry. Now this is good if you have like a really big texture or a really detailed texture, but I was using a color ramp that was like 64 by 64 pixels and it was blurring it out, and it took me so long to figure out where the option for the texture filter was. There is a option in the project settings, but I think that's only for like 2D. That's like the general import settings or the default import settings. I had no luck with that. But I'll get to that later when I, revisit the texture. Also, exporting one GLTF file or like models one by one, which I would usually do in Unity, so I have them separate. In Godot, you can export everything in one file, and then if you double click that file, you can go to Actions in the top left and set Mesh Save Paths, and then it will export each separate mesh as its own like mesh file. Which is really fucking cool. That saved me a lot of time just figuring that out. And so when it creates those meshes, it takes the data it takes the name from the mesh data, which in Blender or which in Unity you would get the name that you set in the file, but here it uses the mesh data. So you can actually go to the data tab in Blender, and then you'll see the little name, and it's like usually cube something or cylinder something. It's like the object that you started with. So to change that, I made a little script. It was just literally 3 lines of code in Blender in Python. to rename the mesh data name to be the same as the actual, you know, model name. So that saved me like a bunch of time because I had like 123 assets, I think. Saved me a bunch of time. So I imported it and created scenes. I couldn't figure out the best way to do this, or prefabs, you know. I just did like manual labor here. This was intense. 123 assets just, you know, dragged in by hand. So that was fun. As I said, you're supposed to use mesh instance 3D. I think that's the node's name, which takes in the mesh that you got from the GLTF file. So it's a bit more complicated than in Unity, but I like it. A mesh instance is supposed to be like instanced mesh. Obviously, idiot. Okay. So like, I think it's so if you just dragged in the mesh, I think it would, for each mesh it would, you know, put it into memory and then read from it. But I think if you use a instance mesh, it only puts one in memory and then draws all of the other meshes. So if you had like 3 meshes of a wall, it would actually just be one wall in the memory. I'm pretty sure. That's just my uneducated opinion. Also made a showcase level to showcase everything, which also took a little bit of time, but it's fine since I wanted to put it up on the Godot marketplace. I asked yesterday if that's what people used for Godot assets. I didn't get an answer really, so I just went for it and uploaded it. But not before I fix the texture. So if you get this problem using a color ramp and then it's smoothing out the texture, it's because of the filter, and the filter option is actually in the material in the sampling tab, and there you can change the filter, which is a bit weird because I would think that the texture filter is on the texture import settings, which is not. So yeah, that took me a bit of foruming. I didn't find that on the forum. I should probably put it somewhere so people, when they go look for it, they know. Also, I just exported everything as a zip file and then tried importing it into a, you know, a brand new project to see what would happen, and it worked, which is amazing. Also, when uploading, I didn't really know, like you're supposed to say which Godot version works. I wasn't sure, so I just put unknown, which is sad, but okay. Also, a great thing in Unity, or in the Unity asset store, when you go to upload a model, you can wait up to 2 months for them to review your thing. And here it said it would either take a few hours or 3 days, which is amazing. I mean, I know it's a much smaller marketplace, but still, just nice that they do it quickly. I'm not sure if this will be up by the time this video comes out, but I'll put the link in the description once it does, so you can check that out. Now the player arms. So the mesh is pretty simple. You export it same as any other static mesh, same as I did with the survival kit. And then you also export animations with it, which is like a checkbox in the Blender export settings. And then you can, same way I did the, you know, save mesh data to, you know, file, whatever it was. There's an action in the top left that will save all the animation data into its own folder. That was great. So you get the animations there. And then I had a lot of trouble figuring out how to get the skeleton in the scene because I didn't want to rebuild the whole skeleton. I don't know if that can be even done because there's skeleton nodes and joint nodes. And when I would just drag it in, it would again give me just a node 3D. The trick is to right click on the GLTF that has the skeleton and just create a new inherited scene, and everything is set up. So that was super simple. I just didn't know about it. So now I had the skeleton and the mesh, everything connected in a separate scene, and I just added that to the player. Now the animations, whenever you have a rigged object, it will have a animation play node, I'm pretty sure, but you also need to add a animation tree node, which is like the animator in Unity, and it wasn't too different from it. It was actually really simple, really cool actually. For some reason, I don't know, I just felt cool working in it. I think Godot has like this blue kind of interface. Feels like you're hacking something. Feels really cool. So I just added a blend tree 1D, which is the same thing you would do in Unity. You would have a one directional blend tree. It just goes from like 0 to 1 or -1 to 1. And then you can change that blend tree property in the script depending on, I don't know, velocity or whatever. And then you can have that control the animation. Also, to add an animation to a blend tree, there's a few little icons on the top left of the animation tree tab or window, and one will let you, I guess, preview the animation or like change the blend tree parameter, whatever. And then there's the one with the little mouse icon that will let you add animations. You just right click and add animation from the resources. And then I just made the method same as in Unity, same as I would in the Unity. Just reference the animation tree, and then or got it as a reference, and then added the function to like handle animations. I made a parameter that would check, you know, if the input is like, if the input is 0, basically, then I would set the parameter to 0, which is the idle animation. If the input is not 0 and we're not pressing shift, then I set it to 0.5, which is the walking. And if the input is not 0 and we are pressing shift, then I set it to 1. But I mean, that worked great, but there was no smoothing at all. And I know I always mention this, but in Unity you can, using the set float function in the animator, you can add another parameter in the end, and like 0.3 do something, I don't know, just a small number, and it will smooth out the transition. And there's none of that in Godot, I don't think. I haven't found it in the documentation. So I just lerped the parameter variable that I had in the script by creating a last parameter script, assigning that at the end of the function. So last parameter would just get set in the end, and then next time you come back to that function, last parameter is set to what it was before, and then the new parameter is the new parameter. I guess it makes sense. And then I just blended it with delta time and a animation smoothing variable, which I in the end I think I set to 5. I think that was pretty good. And then I just feed it the desired desired parameter. It's just a basic lerp function. I mean, it's simple. And it worked amazing. Now it was looking smooth. Also added the jump, and obviously don't add the jump in the blend tree, so I just went back to the animator and added something called a one-shot. I think it's a one-shot node. Basically it plays the animation once and then goes back to its normal business, and you can just set that parameter inside the script whenever you jump. It's something weird. Wait, let me just check real quick. Yeah, so basically when you want to change the value, you have to get its property path. You can do that by right-clicking in the inspector, you know, select the animation tree, go to the inspector, and then you can right-click on the property you want to change. You can copy the property path and then change it, use that in the script as the name. In Unity, you would just use the name of the, you know, animation you're trying to change. But here you get the property path, which is completely fine because it's easily accessible, as I've said. And then you set the value to whatever you want. And for the one shot, you have to set it to animation node one shot request fire. I just thought, at first I just set it to true and it wasn't working, so I just did some digging. All in all, animations in Godot, or 3D animations in Godot, quite simple actually. I thought it was going to be much different than Unity for some reason. Actually, I think it's not the same. I would say Unity is a bit easier, but this is not that much different. So we'll see once I start adding more. Tomorrow I'd like to start adding interactions, and that's all. I don't think I skipped anything of today. So yeah, that was it. I guess until the next update. Bye now.